Welcome to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. I interview incredible people who've dedicated their lives to helping those who've been impacted by trauma. Here we go. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the podcast. Very excited to have as my guest today, Choi. Sue, welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Thank you. Sue is a somatic movement expert and body worker with over 2 decades of experience working with clients to resolve chronic body issues. Her book, When Things Stick, Untangling Your Body from Old Patterns, outlines a multisensory framework to develop self-trust and move forward. This framework has helped therapists find quick and reliable breakthroughs with their clients. All right, Sue, before we get going here, share with the listeners where you're from originally and where you are currently.
Okay. Originally, I was born in Seoul, Korea, but we came to the U.S. when I was only 2, and I grew up in Indianapolis, Indiana, so I'm Midwesterner, but I've lived around the world, and I landed here in Los Angeles.
Okay. Well, let's dive in here. How did this start, this interest, this passion? How did all this begin for you?
For me, it was kind of a long struggle with depression. I've kind of struggled with that my whole life, and going to different therapists and not wanting to go on medication. So when I was in California, I was in San Francisco at the time, and I had put myself in what I consider the best situation possible. And I thought that would work in terms of work situation, living situation, and I was so miserable. And it was at that point I was working with someone, and again, we're just kind of treading water, and I realized how far away from being in my body I had gotten in terms of just self-care. I was smoking, I wasn't taking care of myself, I didn't feel good. So I made one commitment to go to something every day. So I went to either a yoga class or a martial arts class every day. And that changed everything for me. It changed so quickly. I was able to get out of that bad relationship, stop smoking. I really changed things that, the talk therapy didn't move. And she was very impressed too. And then I just wanted to learn more about that. And so I studied more, and I realized I just couldn't do this on the side. And so I kind of dove in head first into a future that I had no idea what would look like, but I dedicate myself full time to learn more about it. I just took a lot of trainings. My first training was just a very simple yoga training. I was doing Ashtanga yoga at the time, but at that time in the late 90s, there weren't a lot of yoga trainings. There were only 3. And so I did one of them. But then I knew I needed more, so I went to India to study yoga therapy. And so the DNA of this work has always been around mental, emotional change that you can find through the body. And so I spent like 5 months there, and then when I came back, I started to study what I could. I started doing body work just to learn more anatomy, because I didn't have that background. Mm-hmm. And I just kept learning and learning to try to get better outcomes for me, and then as I started working with people for my clients.
So you were all in, as they say.
Yeah.
So, all right. This depression, when did that start for you?
I mean, I think I've had it most of my life. I mean, I remember, I don't have a lot of memories of my childhood, but I do remember, I think I must have been 6. So this is Indianapolis, and I'm thinking, I see people, they're going to work, and they're just kind of living this life. They go to a shopping mall, and I'm like, there has to be more to life than this. It was a real feeling like that this is not life. This is not what I want. I don't see like a lot of stimulation or inspiration in what was modeled to me. Mm-hmm. And so that was, I think it was really a depression that came from like longing for meaning and longing for a desire to feel alive.
In addition to that longing, how else did it manifest? The depression?
I mean, I was definitely very disembodied, and I didn't recognize it at the time, but a lot of daydreaming, a lot of not being present. When I was in college, like these, I'm in California right now, and these kids learn yoga and stuff. There was none of that. And I didn't go to a gym or anything. And when I was in grade school, I didn't do any sports. In high school, I did some sports, a little tennis, a little cheerleading, but it was nothing really extensive. I wasn't like competitive in sports. So in college, I had access to the gym, and I recognized that when I spent extra time stretching out, that I felt better. And so I started to make that link there. And but still, it wasn't anything in depth. It was just a recognition that if I worked in my body in a certain way and gave myself some time, that I can feel different.
When did you start with therapy? When did you realize, what, I need to get some kind of help
I
here?
think it was when I was in New York. So that was very expensive therapy because I was in New York. But I was, I had been working, and I had been working overseas, and it was, an exciting life. And then I came back, and I was.
So you were an adult at this time.
Yeah. And
Okay.
so I came back, and it was at a point where you're in your late 20s and you've kind of worked a little bit, and I was wondering, like, what do I do from here? Because do I go back to grad school? And I was a business major, so I had half an MBA done. I could have gone back for another year and finished that up, but it just didn't feel like what I wanted to pursue. And the whole idea of purpose was always a challenge for me in terms of, like, what did I want to do? Business was kind of like a placeholder for me until I discovered what that was.
So walk us through how you decide. I mean, you talked about, going to India and taking all these classes, but let's dial in here. Walk us through how you decided to, what, I want to get into this field. I want to start working with people, and then we'll segue into the book.
Oh yeah, sure. So when I came back, I was just teaching yoga classes, but then I started to take a lot more training, and I kept doing trainings, and then just anything that taught me more about how to improve outcomes for the people I was working with. Because a lot of times,
and in what capacity were you working with people at this time?
Teacher.
Through yoga, okay.
Yeah, yoga teacher. I did a Pilates training too, then Pilates teacher.
Okay.
I taught people meditation. In the early days when I was doing yoga, I would kind of extend the meditation session and then just do like a small warm-up and teach them just to be in stillness and to pay attention. But, I didn't really do that in a big way. It was always about body first. And at one point I was thinking, should I go back to school? If I did, there really weren't good options for somatic psychology, because that would be ideal. Mm-hmm. So, like, did I go more into body or more into psychology? And I eventually went with body just because the outcomes were more tangible. And, but, because there wasn't really a lot of good programs, I thought, like the somatic therapy focuses a lot on sensing and feeling, right? There wasn't enough body in it. Mm-hmm. And then the body training, like physical therapy, there's not enough sensing and feeling in it. Mm-hmm. So I was trying to build something for really rapid results down the middle, because I felt like it wasn't really quite well articulated or specific and repeatable and as quick as it could be.
So in what capacity now are you working with people?
I do most of my work online now.
Okay.
Yeah, and what I find is when I went online during the pandemic was people took a lot more ownership because I couldn't touch them. So if they came in to see me and they, I can make changes in their body, there's already a idea that you do this. It's because of you. And it's not because of me. I've always given people like little routines that they could do on their own to replicate what we did in session. And I could tell the people who worked in between our sessions, they accelerated very quickly. They reported back what was happening. They were invested in it because they were taking that step. But a lot of people, because, I'm paying for your expertise and you're going to help me, they're in this mindset that they're not going to make the change, right? They're paying me to make the change, and it's not that at all. And when they work online, it's really great because I can't touch them. I can't make that change. And when they see that they can make a change inside themselves, like a real palpable change, reliably and predictably, it's super empowering. And it lays the groundwork for working with trauma and working through things that otherwise might feel overwhelming or just too hard to change.
That brings up a good point. The body is, I think, hard for a lot of people to, and I'm making a generalization, of course, here, but I think for many people, not everyone, of course, but it's hard. What do you mean get into my body? What do you mean feel my body? What has been your kind of broad brushstroke perception of how people engage with their body, or the degree to which they're able to and willing to engage with their body?
Yeah, I think, the reason that it feels like inaccessible for a lot of people is, well, for people who have a history of trauma, is because they very often absent their body because it wasn't safe, because it's too overwhelming to feel the feelings. But in general, the directive to get back into your body is just too vague. It doesn't, so they're like, okay, so I'm going to exercise, I'm going to lift weights or whatever. It's when you get into your body with a very specific purpose and intention, with a very specific framework.
For example?
Yeah. So here's the framework.
Okay.
Is like you learn how to stand and you learn how to walk. Those two things are the foundations for how I work with people. And when you narrow down the possibility of what you're working with in your body, then you can really go into the details in a way that just will surprise you.
So what do you mean when you learn how to stand and learn how to walk? Let's talk about this.
Yeah,
so now we're getting into your book.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So the whole idea of getting into your body in this way is you're getting into your body below the personal story level. So it's not the Guy body, it's not the Sue body, it's a human body standing on Earth. A human body standing on Earth has a lot of power and intention that's evolved for millions of years to help you accomplish that. If you get into the specifics of that, what you start to feel is you start to feel capable. You start to feel how your body is a resource and not a burden or something that's not safe. You start to be able to work with your body in a neutral place. So if you're working with the Guy body, there's the whole story of Guy's life that is embedded in there.
Mm-hmm.
But you can put that aside and really go down into the clarity of the human body. And that's a thing that we all share. If you can, and I kind of make caveats on this, if you can sit and stand from a chair without assistance, and if you can walk outside for 30 minutes without getting out of breath, that you can do this work. If you have more limitations, then you might need more therapeutic work.
I'm just writing down something you said that I think is amazing. Let's back up a little here. When did you decide, and why did you decide to write this book?
I had wanted to kind of bring everything that I did together in some cohesive way. And the going online was something I wanted to do. I just didn't have the time to do it. So it was a great opportunity. And my whole thing was to have people taste test it, to try it out on their body. When they feel that profound difference, then they can continue on with it. But what I found was the difference was too surprising and too kind of out of the box that people didn't know what to make of it. So I wrote a book around, and I kind of framed it out in a way that fits this concept of what it means to stand on your own 2 feet. So that's adulting, that's resilience, that's ownership, and that's presence. And what it means to move forward. That's trauma resolution, that's really showing up for yourself, that's going in the direction of your intention and your heart's desire.
So, I mean, obviously there's a lot of now, somatic courses out there, therapies, treatment modalities, and so forth, books. How did you, because what you're describing is very interesting to me. I certainly haven't talked to anyone who's doing what you're doing. How did you come at it from this angle, in a sense?
It came in pieces. I think one of the turning points for me was when I read Dr. John Rady's book. He's a psychiatrist. He wrote a book, and it's, I think, in the early or mid 90s, called it's a user's guide to the brain: perception, attention, and the four theaters of the brain. So he's a psychiatrist, and he writes about how he treats people and their sensory issues, and how that can make such a change. It was so powerful and very profound that one woman in particular, he worked with her auditory issue, and she had, been hospitalized. She identified as having this disorder, a psychiatric disorder, when, in fact, if he addressed her auditory issue, she could function normally. So and I don't know, I sense that a lot, that people struggle, and their struggles are not personal struggles. They're just body struggles, sensing struggles, perception and interpretation struggles. And that when you can work on that level and open up people to have space, like I like to say that you're giving people back their bandwidth. Because if your bandwidth is eaten up by trying to stay straight or trying to figure out what you're seeing, like if you have glasses, like if you need glasses to see and you take it off, it's a lot of struggle to try to figure out where you are. Mm-hmm. So when you can take that struggle away, you offer people more bandwidth to deal with the things that life throws at them.
So let's talk a little bit how you organized the book. Again, let me just remind everyone, I'm speaking with Sue Choi. The book is called When Things Stick: Untangling Your Body from Old Patterns. How did you, first of all, who's the book for?
So the book is for people, I like to say it's for people who have tried other somatic modalities already, because the process of paying attention to what you're feeling in your body can sometimes take a little bit of training. However, from the feedback, because I've sold, like over 15,000 books, from the feedback that I get from the book, even people who don't necessarily have a lot of experience with that, but are curious, have done their therapy, have know their story, right? This isn't a 101 book. You shouldn't do this as your first exploration into your mind, body, and your trauma, for sure. But people who don't have a lot of experience still get pretty profound results. But it can be a kind of bumpy ride. If you are experienced in mind, body, you've been doing that for a while. You're used to sensing small internal signals. Then this is you're gonna, the more experience you have, the more you'll get from the book.
So it sounds like it would also be good for not just clients, but therapists, psychotherapists as well.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, I'm very intrigued by this. So how did you structure the book?
Well, one of the things, like you asked, like how, getting into your body and stuff is so vague and general and out there. A couple of my early experiences with somatic modalities was Hanna Somatics and Alexander Technique. And the people I worked with had such a hard time actually trying to articulate what it was or what was happening, that there's a gap there. And so I wanted to simplify the understanding of what's happening, what you're doing in your body, what's happening. And so I framed it out in standing and walking. And I framed it out in just 6 kind of core lessons where you can get the direct experience of what can change for you. And every lesson is associated with the meaning. So the first one is about finding how you can feel supported in your body. And it's a very accessible concept. A lot of people get a lot from that and use it again and again. But it's really not about the action. It's about the experience of being able to feel safe in your body when you don't have to hold yourself up because your body is designed to hold you. How can you find that? And if you could find it in a reliable, predictable way, suddenly you're way forward, right, in how comfortable you are in your body.
This is really interesting to me. So, who do you work with? Who comes to you to work? Are people specifically or primarily who've been impacted by trauma, or just people?
Yeah, I would say a lot of people have, but some people haven't. Sometimes they're coming just with a physical thing. But because it relates back to meaning is kind of the binder for the
Yeah.
physical and the mental emotional. When you understand the meaning that changes in your body evoke, then you change your perception of yourself, of your personal narrative, of what's possible.
Give us an example of that. When you change the meaning of what's happening, give us an example of that. What does that look like?
So
What might that look like for?
yeah, so I'm thinking of someone in particular who was very rigid when she came in. She, her job was in IT, and she was very like, I have to get it right, I have to get it perfect. And her journey has been amazing because she took on a physical challenge like a century bike ride, which she wouldn't have done before. And now she's 60, and she's cracking open a new aspect of herself because she's not beating herself up for not doing it right or trying to work harder to make it happen, right? She's able to meet herself in a different way that's more compassionate, more educated about how she can operate in her body system, and more accepting and more playful. So what it does is, like a lot of people say, that they feel more playful in their body because that level of discovery in your body that kids have because there's so much happening, you can start to capture that again because you're feeling your body differently. You're going into different places. And so it feels fun and refreshing because, most of my people are more in midlife or later. So they have this, when we're young, we're kind of pushed by hormones to go through life and have experiences, and we don't have a lot of reference point. But you get to a certain point where now you have a lot of data in your life and you can notice the patterns. Mm-hmm. You get frustrated where you're stuck, mm-hmm. and you start to feel the diminishment of possibility. Mm-hmm. And so when you feel that deep, visceral change that is surprising, that you wouldn't expect in your body, that's when all those neurons go on. Now that you get that excitement again.
Now, and when you're working with someone, how do you invite those changes? How are you working with them such that they're moving in such a way or experiencing something in such a way such that they're able to experience that?
Well, most of the work is in standing. That's one thing. That's very
Okay.
different from some other practices.
Yeah.
Because that is the human challenge of standing on these two little flat platforms and managing the weight of your head. So, you could just imagine a child and you watch that child try to walk. It's a big neurological thing when they start to stand and walk. Mm-hmm. And they are, things are firing off because that's a very complex thing. So when you relearn how to stand first, how to find that balance, and you're balancing in a way that recruits everything, instead of having to work at it, that you're able to allow the connections to happen so that your body can support you. So in martial arts, they teach you this. I have so many people who have been doing martial arts for decades, thinking they understood what the lower dantian was. But when they do this work, they're like, oh, wow, that's what it is. Mm. I had this concept of what it is. I thought I was connecting to it, but it's such an internal thing that it's hard to teach. So I teach in a very kind of clear way. Somebody said that he said you can communicate that in a way that's not bound up in esoteric language.
This is very interesting to me, Sue. I really like I really like this. There's something obviously so like elemental about standing and moving, right? There's just something so visceral about it. I mean, just the fact that the people you're working with are standing, just that in and of itself feels to me like you can't. I mean, you have to be present, right? You have
Yes.
whether you're shifting around in your body. It invites a kind of awareness that might not otherwise be called upon if someone was just sitting down.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Or lying down.
or
If you're
lying down.
receiving a treatment on the table and then you get up, all of those patterns to stand, all of your postural patterns, all of those come back online because you haven't relearned anything when you're lying on a table receiving something from someone else. So when you're standing up and making the changes in real time to yourself, that's a huge, huge elevation in your skill set.
How does what you do differ from some of the other somatic therapies out there that people might be familiar with, such as somatic experiencing or sensory motor, or and on and on and on?
Yeah, a lot of those, the framework is a key one. The frameworks on that is just the action of sensing, or it's not in the larger framework of standing and walking, because when you put it into those contexts, you can use it all day long. You don't have to sit on the side and do it, and you don't need a practitioner. It is you discovering your own body, and I like to say in the language that your body understands.
And when you say discovering, what does that mean? How is a client learning to discover? What are you inviting them to do?
They're learning to feel what their body is capable of when they can learn how to organize themselves differently. What they'll find is they'll find internal connectivity, and specifically in standing, they'll find how their skeleton can support their structure, and then there's a hydraulic column of support up the center of their self that they can learn to trust.
When we bring in trauma, which just feels like the wrench in the cog, how does that work? How do you bring that in? It just seems like it can be very challenging for a lot of us, for a lot of people.
Yeah. So in all trauma work, you have to build up the resources for it first. And so we spend a lot of time building up the resources, and that's what it is, standing on your own 2 feet, and then learning specifically the clarity of how a human system moves forward, which is moving back and forth from side to side in a way that you could learn to ride that process inside of you, which is the infinity movement. And so in Tai Chi, right, they do that. They're doing this constant weight shift from side to side. So when you can feel the clarity of that in your body, and the clarity comes from working with your cerebellum, which is, the little brain at the base of your head that organizes the same side of the body. And then you understand that conscious movement, walking, works from the opposite side. So, we know that if you have a stroke in your somatosensory cortex on the right side, your left side will be affected. So to work on my left side, to organize my left side, takes the cerebellum and then the opposite somatosensory cortex. So there's an integration there that happens so that you can pass cleanly to the other side. And that action of organizing on one side first, that's standing, and then being able to pass cleanly onto the other side is the essence of being able to be with the center of yourself as you move through life. When you're not the center, You're going to have to reorganize yourself. That eats up bandwidth. Or you have to correct yourself. So you're constantly self-correcting. You could do that in a big way, or you could do that in a very minimal way. The less you have to self-correct, the more bandwidth you have.
Wow. Damn, Sue. Intense. It's just, there's something very beautiful about this. There's something very